Hey guys, welcome back to Coding with NJ. In this tutorial, I'm going to recreate one of the tutorials available on the YouTube on the request of one of my subscribers. That tutorial is about letting the customer choose the amount that he or she wants to pay. So it's slightly different than we have been doing so far, in which the amount has been calculated by the server and the customer has no other option but to pay that amount. Whereas in this video, the customer decides the amount that he or she wants to pay. So before I give you an overview, let me show you the video that I'm basically recreating. So this is the video by CJ Avila. It's about accepting variable amounts with Stripe checkout using PHP. It's a great video, but I think the target audience for this tutorial are advanced level programmers. So I'll try to simplify this video for beginner level and intermediate level programmers. So let me give you a demo, which is quite simple. Over here, you are given a list of charities you can choose from for donation. And for the currencies, you have two options, British pound or euros. And for the donation, you can choose any amount that you like. The minimum, the default one that I have chosen is 50. But you can obviously choose any amount that you like. Let me say 63.50, or you can decrease this amount or increase this amount. It's up to you. And then click on this donate button. Now we are being redirected to pre-built checkout session. So for the payments over here, you are given three options. You can choose a card, you can choose zero pay, and for that zero pay you only have to provide email and name, and then you will be redirected for other verification somewhere. And for the ideal, again, you can choose the bank that you like. So let me choose ideal and let me randomly select a bank, name it triple. Now let's click on donate. Here I'm being redirected to authorize the payment. So this says authorize test payment. So I'm going to click on this one. And now I have got the status success. So that means I have successfully made the payment. Let me go and check the account as well. Let's go to payments, and you can see the payment 67.56 euros. This is a customer and this is the payment method, the card, some randomly generated number, obviously this isn't my card, and the rest of the details. Okay, so this is what we are going to do in this tutorial. And to keep the video length shorter, I'm going to skip the styling part. As you can see, there is hardly any unique styling there, just coloring, bringing the contents in the center, and just rounding the edges. So nothing special there that you are going to miss out. Okay, with that disclaimer, let's start coding. Okay, let's first start our two folders for Frontend and Backend. Now let's start working on the front end. Let's create index file. Let's create scripting and styling files as well. Now let's generate basic skeleton for the HTML, for the title, donations, and in the body let's create a div with the class container. Within that div, let's first create a heading, donation for charities. Now let's create a form with the class name form donations. We don't need any action over here, and also we don't want default behavior associated with the form when its submit button is clicked. So therefore let's define the click event and return false. Within the form we have three fields, and I'm going to keep each of those fields in their respective divs. So let's create a label. The first one is the charities. If you remember from the demo, the first input field is actually a drop-down list. Therefore, we are going to use select HTML element. Name and ID, both I am going to say charity. And within this select element, for each of the charities, we are going to create an HTML element called option. So for the first option, the value is, let's call it animal rescue, and this animal rescue is going to be displayed in the browser, whereas this animal rescue is the value which is going to be received by the server. For the second one, we have red cross, and the third option that we have is, let's say, Greenpeace. So these are the three charities to which a customer can donate. Now we also want to give our customer the freedom to choose the type of currency that it wants to pay the donation in. So we need to create another farm group. This farm group is basically the class name for a div. I'm creating those separate divs so that I can apply CSS styling to them. Otherwise they are not mandatory, as you know. So let's create a label for currency. And inside this, I want the customer to choose from either Great British Pounds or Euros. So option value is Great British Pound. Second option is Euros. So for the values, we have to make sure we select the exact three letters that the stripe recognizes. So for the British currency, we have to say GBP for Great British Pound, and if it's European Euro, we have to write EUR. If it's Canadian dollars, then we have to say CAD, and likewise. So you have to make sure that you choose the right symbol for the currency. Okay, for the third farm group, we need an input field to which the customer can enter the amount that he wants to donate. The last is the submit button. I'm not putting it inside any div. Let's call it donate. For this input field of type number, let me select a default value as well. So default value, I'm saying 50.0. That means 50 pounds or euros. And let's define the step to be 0.01. So 0.01 means 1 pence or the equivalent amount in the euros. So every time you press the up or down arrow keys in that input field, the amount is going to be increased with 1 pence or decreased with 1 pence. Now let's bring in the styling file. And since we will be using the stripe, so we have to bring in the script for the stripe. js.stripe.com version 3. Let's put defer, and we need our own scripting file as well. Now let me bring in the styles, and then we'll look in the browser how does it looks. Okay, since we don't have any backend so far, so I'm going to open the index file in the live server. Okay, so this is how it looks, but it doesn't do anything at the moment because we don't have any backend. But before working on the backend, let's work on the JavaScript file, which is going to send a fetch request to the server to create a session with the stripe and send us back the session ID so that we can proceed further from the client side. So let's work on our JavaScript file. Our JavaScript file is going to be a smaller one as well. Just few references to the HTML elements and then a fetch request. So let's get cracking. We need a reference to the charity so that we can figure out which charity has actually been selected. Since we gave it a class name charity, we have to do the same for donation and currency and the button as well. Since I've given IDs, not classes, so let me put hash over here, and likewise hash currency. Okay, so now we need to attach an event listener to the button. Now within this event listener, let's create an object of type stripe. This stripe constructor needs the public key of the account on whose behalf the stripe is going to deduct from the customer. So let me go to my Stripe account and get the public key. So let's go to developers, API keys, public key, paste. Now let's make a fetch request. Localhost port 8080. It's going to, my server is going to run on this port. If you change the port number, obviously you have to change it over here as well. And likewise, backend is going to be in the folder named backend, and I'm going to name it server.php. So this is the file that I'm going to create, which is going to represent the server. Now this fetch requests another object in which I have to define the configuration parameters. Since I'm going to send the form data, so therefore I must choose post as my method, the HTTP request method. Now for the body, so this time I'm not going to send data as a JSON, I'm going to send it as simple form data as a text data. So I'm not going to use JSON anywhere. Anyways, for the body, as it is supposed to get all the data in the form, and we have to somehow let fetch know that get the data from the form and send it along with the HTTP request. So for that, we have to send the data as a form data object. So we need to create a form data object, and within its constructor, I have to provide the reference to the HTML form. Document.query selector, and we have given the class form-donations to the form. That's it. Now this form data is going to extract all the data from the fields in the form, creates an object, and that object is stored in the body attribute of the fetch method. And as we know that this fetch method returns us a promise, we have to use then statement. And since we are sending simple text and we are expecting simple text, so now the response that has been received from the server contains whole HTTP response. We only want to extract the body part. So for that, we are going to call the function called text. So this text method is going to extract just the body part, the actual data that has been sent back from the server, and transforms into a normal text. And because this text also returns us a promise, therefore we have to use another then block. And over here, now we have got the actual data sent from the server, and we will make sure the server only sends just the session ID. So this data basically contains nothing but the session ID over here. So from here, we have to make a request to the Stripe to redirect the customer to the checkout session page with this ID, which is available in this data attribute. So let me change it to session ID as well. Now this session ID has been returned by the server, and we are naming it session ID as well. Now let's make a request to the Stripe redirect page. And this redirect to checkout method takes an object which is supposed to contain the session ID. And the session ID we have over here. So let's change the name in order to avoid any confusion. Now this parameter, this exact name, is expected by the Stripe checkout session. So we have to make sure that we use the same name, but over here we can change it. So I didn't want to have any sort of confusion when it reaches the Stripe. Therefore I changed the name over here. Ses ID. Now this ses ID contains a session ID which has been returned to us by the server, and we are sending this as a session ID as the value for this session ID attribute to checkout page. Now we have to work on our backend. So let's go to the backend folder and create a file. Since I've given the file that is representing the server as server.php over here in the front end request, so I'm going to create a file with the same name. Now before I start any coding over here, let me pull in the package that is going to make PHP communicate with the Stripe. So composer require Stripe / Stripe-PHP. Now as you can see, we got new files and one folder created over here, vendor and these two composer files. With the help of this package, now the PHP is able to communicate with the Stripe. So let's start coding. We need to include the autoload.php from this vendor folder so that it can handle all the requests between the PHP and the Stripe. Now since this vendor folder is not inside the backend folder, so we have to say starting from the current folder, go one folder up, and there we have a folder named vendor, and within that folder we have a file named autoload.php. Now this file is going to keep on listening for any request from the client. We have to make sure the request that has been made, it is of type post. We don't want to respond if it's any other request. So if the request method is of type post, only in that case following should happen. So in the following, the next thing it should check is that whether actual data has been sent or not in the body. So we know that the data that is being sent in the body is actually the form data, and one of the fields have name currency, another has name charity, and the third field has the name donation. So we have to make sure that those fields are not empty. So if not empty charity, and let me copy this part, not empty currency field and not empty donation field, only in that case do the following. So let's define that following. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to sanitize the data. When we receive any data from the customer, from anything outside of our server file, we must always sanitize it so that we can avoid many security threats. Since we have 3 pieces of information to sanitize, so that means this post is actually an array, and to sanitize an array we are going to use the method filter var array. The first one is going to be the array that we want to be sanitized. So it's post super global variable, and the second is the type of sanitization that we want to apply. So basically we want anything that has been returned to be converted into string. So the reason for converting everything into a string is that if in case the customer has entered some kind of command to be executed on server or our database, that command gets converted into a data type string. Server can execute the commands, but since now we are changing the type from whatever has been sent into a string, so now we are safe. Even if the customer has tried to trick us, instead of sending some charity name or some donation value, it put a command to, let's say, delete the whole database, then that command will convert into a string, and a string cannot be executed because the string is not a command anymore. It's just string. We don't have any database in this program, but it's always a good practice to sanitize anything received from the customer before using it anywhere. Okay, now once this data is sanitized, this filter variable array returns us a new array. So we have to store it somewhere, so I'm going to give it name post. Now this post is actually an array, an associative array, and it contains all the data which has received through this super global variable post with the same names. But now this is a local variable and it is sanitized as well. And now since we need to communicate with the Stripe to create a checkout session for us, we need an object of type Stripe client through which we will make this communication. So let's create a variable named Stripe, and let's create an object of type Stripe client. Now this Stripe client needs the secret key of the same account whose private key has been used in the front end. So let me go back to the Stripe account and let me get the secret key. Paste. Now let's create a session. This create method takes an array as its parameter. So let's define the content of that array. The first one is going to be the success URL. This is where the customer is going to be redirected if the amount has been successfully deducted from the customer's chosen mode of payment. So I want the customer to be redirected back to our original front end page, but with one attribute attached to the URL. So I want the status to be shown as success. We need a similar URL in case the Stripe failed to detect amount from the customer's card or whatever mode has been chosen. Next we have to define the mode of payment. Since it's a one-time payment, so it's not model, it's mode. So the value is payment. Now we have to define submit type and set it to donate. What the submit type is going to do is that when the customer is redirected to the checkout page and the user has filled in all the details, then at the bottom the button that the customer is supposed to click to make that payment actually happen, that button is going to show the word donate instead of pay if we set submit type to donate, because the default is pay. Next we have to define the payment method types. This payment method types is going to display all the options that we want the customer to be given, and from those payment method types the customer can choose whatever payment method type he can choose to pay the money with or donation with. For example, the customer can pay with a credit or debit card, or it can choose some other method such as Zero Pay or Ideal or Alipay. So these are different payment methods, but they are currency dependent. For example, if you have chosen Great British Pound as your currency in which you want to pay the donation or amount, then you cannot use Zero Pay. So Zero Pay option could be used if the currency type that you have chosen is euros. So whenever we are using the payment method types, we always have to make sure that it is consistent with the type of currency that the customer is going to pay in. So whenever we are choosing the options for payment method types for the customer, we always have to make sure that it is consistent with the type of currency in which the customer is going to pay that amount in. So therefore, we must have defined an array in which we have defined the payment method types for each type of currency that we are giving the customer the option to choose from. So therefore, we must have a local array defined over here in which we have the list of payment method types along with each currency that we are giving the customer the freedom to choose from. So let me define a local array with the same name, payment method type. This payment method types is going to be an associative array, and each element is going to be the currency name. Since we are only allowing two types of currencies in our front end, which is Great British Pound, so the name is going to be the currency name, and over here is going to be another array in which we can define all the payment method types that we are going to allow the customer to choose from if the currency that the customer has chosen is Great British Pound. So the only option that I want customer to have if the type of currency that it has chosen is Great British Pound, in that case it is only allowed to use credit or debit card. For the euros, again you have to make sure that you use the correct symbols for the currencies. Otherwise the Stripe won't recognize it. So for the euros, I want to give three options to the customer. The customer can pay with the card, it can pay through Zero Pay, or it can pay through another method called Ideal. So with euros, the customer has three options. So we have to choose one of these two from this array. But we know that this is dependent on the currency chosen by the customer. So therefore, and the index or the element in the index is going to be currency. So we know that this post array is going to consist of all the values that customer has typed in the form in the browser. We want to get the value which is in the currency element or at the currency index. So this is going to give us the currency chosen by the customer, and we are going to use this currency as an index for the payment method type array. And from there, if the chosen currency is Great British Pound, then the card will be displayed in the checkout session page. If the currency chosen is euro, then these three options will be displayed to the customer at the checkout page. Next, we need to define line items. Now this line item is an array of arrays. So each element of line items array is another array. So therefore 2 brackets, and within these brackets, the first element is quantity, since it's one donation per customer at a time, so 1. Next is going to be the price data, which is another array. The first element of price data is currency, and the currency is going to come from the customer, so copy, paste. Second is unit amount. So unit amount is the value of per item, since it's a donation. So whatever donation has been chosen by the customer, it's going to come from the host array, and its element is called donation, where we have the unit amount price. And the third is product data, which is another array. So if you have some product defined in your Stripe account, instead of using product data, you can go for product, with which you have to define the product's ID. Since we don't have any product defined in our Stripe account, so I'm going to go for product data, and the only mandatory attribute over here is name. And for the name, we are going to get the charity chosen by the customer, which is going to come from host array, charity element. So that's it. Once the session is created, now we want to send the session ID from that session and send it back to the client in the HTTP response. So echo session ID. That's it. We don't need to encode it into JSON object, because this time we are using simple text. So it's as simple as that. Now let's go to the browser and see if it works. I've already started the server. It's listening on port 8080. So let's go there. Okay. Let me change Red Cross as a charity. I'm going to go for British pounds. Donation, let me make it 250 and 30 pence. Donate. So we have been redirected to the checkout page. That means everything is working fine. Now if you remember, since I chose the currency to be British pounds, so I have only this card as an option. And since we had chosen the submit type to be of type donate, that's why you can see donate over here. Had we not set that field, we would be seeing the word pay over here. Okay, so now let's go and make a payment. Some zzz@zzz.com is my email address. Name again zzz. 250 pounds 30 pence. Let's make this donation. Now it shows the status successful. Now let's go to the Stripe payments, and you can see this amount 250 pounds and 30 pence, and the customer is zzz@zzz.com. Now let's go and make another donation, and I'm going to go with animal rescue this time. The currency I'm choosing euros. Donation is 20. So as you can see the symbol euros over here, the amount is 20 pounds, and over here you can see I am given 3 options. I can pay through the card, Giro Pay, or Ideal. So let me click Ideal. So when you go for the Ideal, you only have to provide the email address and the bank. So let me jjj@jj.com. Let me choose any bank randomly, and name is JJJ. Donate. Now over here, this is simulating the selected bank's authorization process. So I'm going to click on authorize test payment, and it says status successful. Let's go to the Stripe, refresh, and it shows 20 euros transaction, and the name is JJJ. So that's it. This is the end of our tutorial, and in this tutorial we learned how can we give the customer the freedom to choose the amount that he wants to pay. I hope you liked it. If you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe and share. Thank you so much.